Wherever you're listening in the world, it's a pleasure to welcome you to IsraelCast, the podcast powered by Jewish National Fund USA, your voice in Israel. I'm Steven Shalowitz, first reminding you that for over 120 years, Jewish National Fund USA has been the premier philanthropic movement for the land and people of Israel. While best known for planting trees in Israel, JNF USA contributes to Israeli life in so many ways, including community development in the Negev and the Galilee, preservation of heritage sites, supporting people with disabilities, connecting high school and college students to Israel, and helping our brothers and sisters in need following the heinous October 7th terrorist attack. To learn more and to see how you can contribute, do visit jnf.org. Once again, jnf.org. Plus, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe, rate, and review us, 5 stars, of course, wherever you get your podcasts. It's so easy, and we'd love it too if you share the show within your orbit. All right, as for this episode, and speaking of orbits, our featured guest is Simon Newton-Smith, Senior Vice President, Americas for El Al Israel Airlines. Simon is a seasoned airline professional with more than 20 years' experience working in the highly competitive commercial aviation markets of Europe, the Americas, Australasia, the Middle East, and Africa. And with that, we very warmly welcome Simon Newton-Smith aboard IsraelCast. Welcome to the program, Simon. So great to see you.
Great to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Before anything else, we do have a bit of an announcement to make. Drum roll, please, because we are absolutely thrilled, delighted, ecstatic that beginning this month in February of 2025, IsraelCast, yes, our podcast will be available on El Al. We wanted to share that with you, our dear listeners. Simon, we're excited about that over here. How about El Al?
Yes, we're also very excited. Expands the entertainment options for our customers on board the flights, and I think it's a great reflection of the work and more work we're doing with JNF. So, yeah, really excited.
All right. Well, listen, I can't wait to board my next El Al flight and hear the show in its full glory at 30,000 plus feet. So anyway, so we're all very excited again, beginning February 2025. Well, listen, Simon, we have so many bases to cover, and I really want to start out by asking you if in broad brushstrokes, you can talk about really the biggest challenges for El Al since October 7th, and how has the airline been able to operate really so seamlessly all throughout?
It's a great question, Stephen. And I think basically the biggest challenge that we've had is how we do more with less. You know, it won't surprise you that, many of our employees are Israeli or Jewish and, serving in the military during this difficult time. So we've been operating with 10 to 15% fewer staff than we would normally. So think of pilots, think of cabin crew. But of course, from a customer perspective, we've wanted to do more flying as the only airline that's continued to operate. So, the challenge has been, how do we do more with less? And in fact, again, just amazing effort from the team. We've done, to the US alone, we've done 25% more flying than we had the previous year. We've flown more flights than we've ever flown. And again, we've done that with fewer people. So trying to keep that balanced, keep our people rested, but also deliver what the customers want. It's been quite a balancing act.
And if you don't mind my asking, it's doing more with less. And indeed, I'm sure many have been called up for reservist duty, for example. And so are people working more hours? How does that work, Simon?
Well, certainly from a flying perspective and from a crew perspective, there are only so many hours that crew are legally allowed to fly. So, essentially, and again, credit to the team. This has been part of their war effort. They're taking minimum rest. They're taking fewer holidays, but obviously resting the required hours. But again, there's been a lot of commitment, and nobody expected this would be going on for the length of time that it has. And I think the stamina of our people has just been utterly amazing. But again, I had one job to do. And that job is to keep Israel open, is to keep Israel connected. And I'm really, really proud of what our people have achieved.
And this isn't the first time, let's reflect, that El Al has operated during a war, because, of course, there was the Six-Day War, 1967, Yom Kippur, 1973. And I'm just wondering, is there any sort of institutional knowledge within the airline that has been drawn upon during this war?
Undoubtedly, one of the things that strikes me about the current El Al is the nice blend of tenure as well as a good influx of newer people to the organization. So, it's not unusual to have employees in this business that have been, in fact, I've got one of my colleagues here in the US has been with El Al for over 50 years. So in short, yes, there's institutional knowledge that we've been able to leverage. But also there's a lot of people facing this, for the very first time, including myself.
Sure. And then safety is obviously number one for any airline, especially for El Al. And have additional measures been taken or implemented since October 7th, Simon?
Listen, it won't surprise you that we don't talk in detail about the security, other than the fact that we're famous for it. We're continually changing the security protocol.
Mhm.
But I can tell you that as we've added more flying into the US, and think of JFK, where we're flying up to 6 flights, or New York, we're flying up to 6 flights a day, and it can be as many as 5 into JFK alone. If I look at the structure of our organization, at JFK, which is our busiest station in the US, El Al employees are about 15 to 20. They work with a number of ground handling organizations, but the biggest population, if you like, in the El Al sphere is El Al Security, where we have about 123 employees with El Al Security. And again, that's not an El Al division, that is a government division that specializes in aircraft safety. So it is a huge organization that keeps an eye on all aspects of the aircraft movement and anything going on and off the aircraft. And again, it's just one of those things that we've been doing the right things for a long time. We've just been doing more of it.
Yeah, because I mean, El Al clearly operates differently than other airlines when it comes to security.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, I won't go into lots of
Yeah.
detail. Everything that we've done for many, many years comes into its own in a situation like this. I think one of the more recent developments that all airlines have faced with what's been going on in that part of the world, and in and around Ukraine airspace, is having to adapt to GPS spoofing, which is designed to confuse the radars of aircraft. But El Al is amongst the many airlines that have adopted measures to minimize the effect of that. So even with, if you like, newer developments impacting security and safety, El Al is, as usual, at the front of, if you like, the remedial action to ensure that we're operating safely and securely.
I'm really curious about something, Simon, and for the layman, can you take us behind the scenes and how you manage which routes to cover, which to suspend or to cancel altogether? And because you only have a finite number of planes, do you simply take the planes from suspended or canceled routes and utilize them in beefed up routes like New York, where you have, I think, as you said, it's 6 flights a day? How does that work?
Yeah, so we in real time can measure our sales. So we can see on a minute by minute basis, which routes are selling, which flights are selling on certain routes. But we can also monitor where we're getting cancellations. We can compare the sales to what was happening the previous day, what was happening to the same flight the previous year. Lots of different ways that we can measure flight performance. And clearly the dynamics of the market since October the 7th have changed. There were certain markets where it was more cancellations than new bookings. There were other markets where it was slower sales. There were other markets where there were, potential safety challenges. So, to your question, that is one of the benefits of the airline business compared to, say, a hotel. If the demand environment changed, then you can actually pick up the aircraft and point it in a different direction. So, very specifically, in the early days of the war, we saw softness in demand in both directions to and from South Africa from Israel. So we made a very quick decision to take that aircraft and redeploy it into markets where we could see more demand than supply, and New York was one of those markets.
And then how do you turn a plane around in a dime, as we say, given an immediate need? So where does that plane come from? And I'm thinking, for example, when those Israeli football fans were attacked in Amsterdam, and then El Al sent a plane to Amsterdam to get them and return them back to Israel.
It's really unusual to be able to operate at such short notice like that. And that particular scenario, if you recall, actually happened during Shabbat. So we got special permission as an airline that typically does not fly on Shabbat. We require permission from the if you like the relevant bodies to be able to operate. And of course, because we weren't flying on Shabbat, then all of our fleet was effectively available to us. So we were able to muster up, I want to say it was between 6 and 8 flights to go repatriate, customers from Amsterdam. But it's unusual to be able to just access that many aircraft so quickly. During a typical working week, most airlines do not have aircraft sitting on standby. What you might have is pockets of time where, an aircraft might come in off a long-haul flight and have an extended period on the ground, before its next departure. So it could be arriving from Asia on its way to the US. And sometimes you can literally it's like a little Tetris model where you can take one aircraft and, operate a creative additional leg. But again, the circumstances with Amsterdam and that particular incident was really aided by the fact that we had the fleet on the ground during Shabbat.
Simon, before we move on with more about El Al, I'd love our listeners to know a little bit more about you and your background, because as I said at the top of the show, you are a really, really seasoned airline professional. Share first how you got into the industry, and then some of the key airlines that you worked for. I know about them, but I'd love to hear it from you. And we should add, and I want to share with our listeners, that you joined El Al in November of 2023, just weeks after the October 7th attack. So clearly you knew what you were getting into. And if you can also address what was that big draw in taking on this new role?
Yeah. Thank you. There's a lot in there, but I do like seasoned versus old, so I'll take that. Well, the airline industry I grew up with from a very early age. My grandmother lived about a mile from the threshold of the main runway at Manchester Airport. And as a kid, getting bored of sitting around grandma's house, I used to just take myself off to Manchester Airport and just go watch the action. Anyway, long story short, that was then my love of aviation and travel. My first airline job was as a check-in agent at Liverpool Airport for an airline that sadly no longer exists, called British Midland.
I remember British Midland.
Yeah, a really nice product, a nice airline, but a victim of a very demanding and challenging market. But my career then took me into the sales environment, the commercial environment. Most of my career with Virgin Atlantic. Started in the UK, various overseas spots. And then I got lured into one of those big Middle Eastern carriers, and I always had a desire to have a sneak peek behind the curtain just to see how those guys work. And anyway, fast forward to just over a year ago, I had a very interesting conversation with the new owners who struck me, just their vision of really investing in El Al, taking it to a place that Israelis and the Jewish community deserve it to be. And I bought into that mission. It was very similar to the mission that I bought into when I joined Virgin Atlantic, working with Richard Branson. That was for over 20 years. So that was very much an appeal, a very entrepreneurial spirit, and what I discovered quite quickly as I was having conversations about joining El Al it's like a startup. So it's a startup with a very established brand. So and you're right. I mean, clearly the Israel and that environment, it's not unusual for flare up in the region. So there is a history of what happens during those periods. So I was aware of that. But, I'd actually signed and agreed, during September, I think testament to the El Al security screening process. It was a long process before I got the green light, maybe because I had worked in the Middle East before. But long story short, what I'm attracted to, what I was attracted to, is the passion with which people work. I've been around a lot of airlines, and we all get out of bed in the morning, but it's a lot easier to do it when you've got a purpose. And, El Al has had a very clear purpose since October 7th. It's got a clear purpose anyway. But whilst a few people thought with the war breaking out before I started that I was mad, I could not be more proud to have played a small part supporting El Al and the team since October 7th. I joined an airline that has got a very exciting future. It's got amazing people with amazing heart. And, again, sort of like the purpose and the drive and the commitment that this team works with, I feel immensely privileged to be working here. So, I joined in a leadership position, and people and businesses need leadership in good times and bad. Yeah, again, it's I can't believe it's been a year. I can't believe the organization and Israel has been through what it's had. But, the team here is amazing, and, working alongside them has been a real privilege.
There are a couple of threads there, Simon, that I want to pick up on. And the first is that El Al has become an award-winning airline. And how did that turnaround really happen?
Listen, going back to our majority owners, they've got a very clear vision to invest in the business, and investment comes in many different guises. We're investing in brand new airplanes, we're investing in the onboard service, and there's a correlation. When employees see investment and interest, then it becomes self-perpetuating. We've got an amazing leadership team around customer experience. And the organization, so the awards that you reference, for the fourth year in a row, we just recently picked up an Apex 5-star award. And this is a really challenging, I forget the numbers, but there's maybe only 30 to 40 airlines in the world that are rated Apex 5-star. And it's a really challenging selection criteria. But again, it's a reflection of the consistency and the drive, and actually, listening to customers. And this is a journey. We don't have it all right yet. But I think anyone that has traveled with El Al, albeit on very full flights over the last few months, who maybe hadn't traveled with El Al for a number of years, certainly what I hear from customers is, wow, this is a very different airline than 5 years ago. Very different experience.
Yeah, and I always tell people, I think the food is great on El Al. I remember a couple trips ago, I ordered the vegan, I guess it was Indian vegan meal, and they had a bialy on top.
Yeah.
And that bialy was delicious. It was warm, it was soft, just like I like my bialy. So El Al does do bialys right. I will tell you that. There's another thread that I want to pick up on what you were just sharing a moment ago. And it's this notion that when you wake up in the morning, you have a mission. Because at the end of the day, an airline is really about getting people from here to there. It's about connecting people. When I was on El Al, the last time was January of 2024. That was my last trip to Israel. I felt that there was a spirit aboard the plane. I hadn't felt that before on previous trips to Israel. And I'm wondering if you have heard of people having that same sensation, that the feeling is different when they're on those planes right now versus maybe before October 7th.
Yeah, listen, I think it's anecdotal, but what you've just shared to me is not unusual. I think there is a camaraderie. We've got a community, and I've only been connected to the community for just over a year. And one of the things that I've learned and I hadn't quite appreciated was just how close and connected that community is. Just how close, there's a 12-hour, flight time between New York and Israel, but you might as well be in adjoining suburbs. Everybody knows each other. Everybody knows everything that's important in real time. And I think people get on the airplane and maybe there is a little appreciation of the fact that, there's a common mission with everybody on the flight. There's a common mission with, the crew to get everybody where they want to be. And it's just a unique sensation. And certainly when I've traveled, I felt it. When I've been with my colleagues in head office in Tel Aviv, I, I, I can't actually put a finger on it, but I don't know whether it's, in a way, it's part of the war effort, it's supporting the country, it's supporting each other. It all comes together, but, LL and an aircraft with 275 people on is a very concentrated space. And it really is quite a unique, quite a unique experience.
And you're right, we all know each other.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's like no other airline. It's like no other experience. I can tell you right that. A couple more questions though about LL. I'm just really wondering how's the war impacted the airline's cargo business because that's also important revenue stream for you as well.
Yeah, and listen, it's been very, very similar to the passenger experience, i.e., we got a lot of people that want to ship a lot of goods quickly into Israel, and because the other airlines, for their own reasons, are not able to operate, there is just more demand than we can supply. Yeah, El Al is relatively speaking, it's a small airline, with between 47 and 50 aircraft at any given time. And, we can't, going back to some of the conversation earlier, it is very difficult to squeeze additional flying and capacity out of, a fleet that is designed to work pretty hard anyway. But, cargo has been very strong. And again, anyone that's been trying to travel between Israel and the US and vice versa finds it very difficult to get a seat, certainly last minute, and it's exactly the same with cargo. Exactly.
Let's talk about LL's partnerships. You have Delta, Virgin Atlantic, SAS. Are there other airline alliances that are on the horizon? What should we know about all that, Simon?
Yeah, and I think it's certainly, again, what I've learned coming into El Al is that as an airline, historically, it's operated very independently,
Mhm.
which, it has every right to do so. But, our business as an industry, and you'll know this as a regular traveler, is either about scale or it's cost. So you're either a cost leader or you've got big scale, and right there in the middle of there are some niche operators. But there are ways to achieve scale without necessarily having to order, 500 airplanes, and that is through partnerships. This is about getting people where they want to be. So over the last few years, with a particular peak over the last 12 to 18 months, we've entered into code-share partnerships with a number of airlines. The largest being Delta, which has served us and our customers well, certainly over the last year, just being able to connect our customers to so many points in the US and from the US to the LL flights. But you quite rightly said Air France, KLM, Scandinavian Airlines, Virgin Atlantic. The common theme there is they're all equal partners of each other as well. So each of those airlines partners with the other. But what it allows us to do is, again, just offer customers more choice in terms of flight frequency, offer more choice. So for our frequent flyers, all travel on the code share partners means they earn MATMID points. If you're a Sky Miles card holder, you're earning miles when you're traveling on LL. So it's essentially getting all of the benefits of being a larger airline without necessarily incurring the cost yourself and doing it a lot quicker than we could do it by ourselves. So you'll see more partnerships. It's the way that the industry has had to evolve over the last few years, and LL's playing a bit of catch up, but doing it really well.
And Simon, going back to the war, are there lessons learned since October 7th that LL will carry into the future and that can be shared with other airlines? Is there anything that comes to mind, perhaps?
It's nothing specific that comes to mind. And again, I think LL has operated always with an eye to contingency plans for any given scenario. But again, those contingency plans didn't necessarily account for the war going on as long as it has had. But, so I think it's one of those things, as well as you plan and as much as you plan, there are always elements of, a scenario which take you a little bit by surprise. But, But again, you can never plan for everything. But if you've got your basic plans in place, right down to what happens if you cannot operate from your home airport, what are your alternative plans? At least if you've got those in place, then for those scenarios, at least you've built capacity to, in the moment when something that you hadn't prepared for, at least you've got capacity to think about that. So I think the learnings for other airlines is you cannot stop scenario planning for the wildest of scenarios. Because, as we've experienced in this industry, you think you've thought of everything and then something will come and take you by surprise.
And just speaking of the airline industry, apart from El Al, or maybe including El Al, is there anything, Simon, in particular that you're especially excited about within the airline industry that you see on the horizon, whether it's a new aircraft or a new system, or I'll leave it up to you to answer?
Yeah, I think the evolution of the industry, we're already into effectively a new cycle, which is the new aircraft and the ability to fly smaller aeroplanes further. That basically opens up the opportunity to reshape a lot of networks. In a previous life, there were certain points in the world that, if you wanted to go a certain distance, you had to make a connection. The technology that is coming into the industry right now, whether it's wide body, narrow body technology, there was never, once upon a time, you'd never have thought that you could fly nonstop from Sydney to London, and you'll be able to do that, in the next 12 to 18 months. There was a time that you would never imagine flying a narrow body aircraft across the Atlantic, and that's common. That's common even now. So the world is getting smaller. That starts to change the shape of airlines and the dominance of airlines. So I think the simple fact is our industry, the way that it looks in terms of major players, and the typical business models, what we see now is going to look quite different in a decade's time. And again, technology is driving that.
At the beginning of our conversation, you were highlighting the extraordinary talent within El Al, and I can't remember where I saw it, but I pulled up a little blurb that said Nechama Spiegel, a mother of 7 from Beit Shemesh, an ultra-Orthodox El Al squadron, was promoted to the position of captain and will bear full responsibility for the air and flight crew. An impressive achievement, unquote, the little blurb said. It might have been on X, for example. I don't remember where. But can you just address that? When I saw that, I got shivers.
Yeah, and listen, you and I both. I think it's an amazing achievement, for that individual. But there are so many examples, and again, just going back to the point that I was making before, I don't even want to single out a single person, but my first visit to Israel ever was the second week after I joined, so it was in November 2023, and
you had never been there before.
I'd never been there before. Long story.
That's for round 2.
Yeah. That was the first destination that I ever wanted to go to out of college, but for whatever reason, never happened until November 2023. And what struck me very quickly, and it went back to the point that I was making about so many of our colleagues were serving, as well as working. I mean, I was in meetings where there would be people in uniform that would finish a marketing meeting and then they're going up to the northern. But there was nobody. Every one of my colleagues had a story. It was either they had a child that was serving, or, they knew somebody that was directly impacted, from taken hostage, or they knew somebody. But everybody somehow was bringing their full self to work. I'm a father of 2 boys, and if I knew that one of my boys was serving, in a military zone, I don't think I'd be able to concentrate on my work on a daily basis. But I think the point is that everybody, all of my colleagues, many of my colleagues had got their own story, what was going on in their lives with their family and friends, but were still bringing it to work every day. And, again, covering for the folks that were serving, but again, just helping move this airline into a very different direction. So yeah, I think that was great news on our newest captain at El Al. But I just want to do a shout out to all of my colleagues that have been operating and working and doing an amazing job through a really challenging time.
Right. We want to salute each and every one of them. Simon, as we wind down the conversation, just a couple of really quick questions. Any memorable experience that you had when you were in Israel? It sounds to me like every meeting that you had with everybody was a memorable experience, but was there anything in particular, let's say, that surprised you in your first visit to Israel after all these years of wanting to go?
My first visit was very much to go meet my colleagues. So I think
Mhm.
what I'm sharing with you in terms of what struck me again was just that focus and dedication of the people. It was interesting. My first time in Tel Aviv, I wasn't there to do the tourist sites, but it was very quiet. My second visit was in January of 2024, and there was a noticeable difference. But again, I think to answer your question, it was really just the resolve and the focus of my colleagues, despite their varying personal circumstances, despite the fact that they were doing two jobs. I was hearing about pilots that were flying F-16s, one week, and flying the 787 over to New York the following week. It's just that versatility and commitment is again what's really blown me away, and I'm just looking forward, as as you know, as hopefully we get to a more business as usual environment to Israel. I just can't wait to do the trip that I wanted to do straight out of college, go and see the beauty and the wonder and experience the people of Israel. So it's on my bucket list for this summer.
You'll love it. And don't forget the food as well. Final question, Simon. Personally, carry on or check in?
Carry on, carry on all the time. Finally convinced my wife to shun the check bags. We missed a connection on another airline, I should say, coming in off on an international flight connecting to a domestic. We missed it because we had to collect bags. So my wife is finally sold. Carry on bags all the way.
It makes life so much easier. And you realize, even for a couple of weeks, that you can actually pack very
Yeah,
judiciously, and you can make it happen, because I only do carry on right now unless I need very bulky things and coats, etc., because I'm going to a polar region, for example.
and even then, you just use FedEx to ship the cold stuff back before you go to the warm place.
Simon, this has been such a pleasure, and we want to thank you truly for joining us here on the IsraelCast podcast. We can't wait for a round two, and we can't wait to find out how that trip to yours to Israel this summer hopefully manifests itself and what you enjoy. So we look forward to hearing all about that. But really, truly, we want to thank you for joining us here on this episode of IsraelCast, and we want to congratulate and salute everyone at El Al, whom we absolutely love. And we are so excited and delighted and ecstatic that once again, IsraelCast will be heard in the skies on El Al beginning February 2025. So thanks so much for joining us, Simon.
Yeah, not at all, Stephen. Been great to be with you, and again, really excited to have you on board the aircraft.
All
Thank
right, thanks. And we're
you.
gonna leave it right there. So we'll have info about Simon on the show notes page of our website, jnf.org/IsraelCast. And what I said just a moment ago, don't forget to listen to Israelcast when you take to the skies on El Al. We'd love to have you join us up there at 30,000 feet. Now, as for our show, we do release new episodes on planet Earth every other Wednesday. And just so you never miss an episode, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. It's so easy. Simply search for IsraelCast. And don't forget to rate and review us, because that helps with our rankings, which in turn make it easier for more folks around the world to find us and to hear from people like Simon. You can always enjoy the show also by visiting us at our website. Once again, it's jnf.org/IsraelCast. And indeed, it takes a homo shop to put IsraelCast together. For that, we thank Vivian Grossman, Stefan Oberman, JD Krebs, and Ellie Cadrin. Our editors are Jay Rothman and James Casada from Miratone Studios right here in the very heart of New York City. And the music that you hear at the top and tail of the program is titled My Eden. It's by the very talented Rafi Malkiel from his album Water on the Tzaddik label. IsraelCast is powered by Jewish National Fund USA, your voice in Israel. For more info about JNF USA, do visit jnf.org. And if you'd like to write to us with story ideas or just to say hello, I'm sure Simon would love to hear from you, and so would I. So do email us at israelcast@jnf.org. Meantime, I'm Steven Shalowitz. Thank you for tuning in and looking forward to having you join us on future episodes of IsraelCast.